What's up, and welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Tuesday, December 17th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White and Chris Sowers. Today on the show, we are jumping back into top prospects. Last week, we broke down all the infield prospects minus shortstop. So today, we are dedicating an entire episode to just this position because there is so much talent. Here's how it's going to work. We're counting down Scott's top 20 shortstops from 20 to 1. So, 3 minutes per player. Let's see how we do with that. Heads up, we are recording this in advance, so we won't be talking about any news or notes. So if there's anything else that has happened, you'll have to wait till Thursday. Or if it's that big, I'm sure we have an emergency podcast coming out.
Maybe one of these guys has been traded already. Who knows?
Honestly, Scott, the way things are going right now, that might just happen. All right, so let's jump in. We are counting down the top 20. Once again, if you want to read about any of these prospects or any of Scott's prospects at any other position, you can go to cbssports.com/fantasy/baseball to check that out. Number 20, you have Angel Genao of the Cleveland Guardians. Scott, he is 20 years old, out of the Dominican Republic, switch hitter, big hit tool, lots of speed. MLB.com has his potential ETA as 2026, so he's a little bit further away. What can you tell me about Angel Genao?
Well, first, if you don't mind, I'm going to waste what limited time we have getting into methodology a little bit because there are a lot of shortstop prospects, and there are going to be some names that are highly regarded elsewhere that are left out of my top 20, maybe even ahead of somebody like Angel Genao, who I put here in part because he's already mastered A ball and is ready to move up to AA. So there's this term in the prospecting world, personal cheese balls, that refers to prospects that you're higher on than the consensus. But I feel like you get to a point in the prospect rankings, you get far enough down the list that you break through that consensus layer, and it's all cheese balls. And I think starting here at 20 at shortstop, we're in the all cheese balls section. So I like to prioritize nearer term guys that I think will be something in the majors rather than very down the level, down in the very lower levels, tons of upside theoretically, but huge potential that they'll just totally bust. So I'm leaving some of those guys out. I'm going with an Angel Genao instead. And what I like about Genao is that he's a very good hitter in the hit tool kind of sense. He batted no less than 307 in any 1 month between low A and high A. Doesn't chase for being a guy so young, has a really good understanding of the strike zone. And while there isn't a lot of raw power, it's improving. He improved his exit velocities this year. He also stole 25 bases. So it's a very conventional Guardians middle infielder prospect. I feel like they have a lot of these guys with really good hit tool. Not sure if the power is ever going to get there. But Genao seems to like he's the very best of those options and has less downside risk than some of the others.
Scott, you bringing up personal cheese balls reminded me of, did you guys ever eat that, like a barrel of like Utz?
Dude, I bought one of those recently.
They're so good.
Yeah, love those things.
Gosh, I mean, your fingers get covered in, I guess, like artificial cheese, but all right.
Pro tip.
I eat it with a fork. Do you too?
I was gonna chopsticks.
Chopsticks. All right. Yeah.
Chopsticks for Cheetos. Yeah.
You won't think I'm so weird for eating cheese doodles with a fork, but it gets under your fingernails.
Yeah, preserving the fingers. I get it. It's weird.
Fork doesn't seem like the right choice. I think spoon would be better.
Nah, fork is good. You get in there, stab them, you get out pretty easily.
It is a little odd, some of the things we choose to eat with silverware and not. Like it. There comes a point where it feels just cultural as opposed to practical. Like for instance, let's say you have a steamed green bean, no butter or anything, just kind of steamed. What's stopping you from eating that with your fingers? Like it's less messy than cheese doodles, clearly, and it's shaped like a French fry. It seems like it's made for eating with your fingers, but you can't eat it with your fingers because that's barbaric. It's uncouth.
You can just eat it with your fingers.
You can do it, Scott. I won't tell anybody.
But it's uncouth.
Yeah. Who cares?
Let's talk about number 19 shortstop prospect, and that is Luisangel Acuña of the New York Mets. Of course, the younger brother of Ronald Acuña. And Chris, I remember you bringing this up in season. It's pretty scary how similar their swings look. Ronald and his younger brother. He turns 23 years old in March. He's had a very up and down minor league career. Got a taste with the Mets, 14 games, extremely small sample. He was awesome in that small sample. He hit 308. He had 3 home runs. He had a 966 OPS.
That's the whole reason he's here. I think I said on the podcast prior to him getting called up, he's not going to be a top 100 prospect for me next year. But then he came up and made such an impact for the Mets, became a cult hero for their fans, I feel like, with the damage he did filling in for Francisco Lindor down the stretch. And it doesn't take much to move the meter with prospects. Clearly there's pedigree here for Luisangel Acuña, but I think you're about to go to Chris and I just jumped in.
It's all good. Chris, look, there's intriguing power and speed here for Acuña, and he could play multiple different positions. I just, as stacked as the Mets are going to be, I think they're continuing to make moves. They want to obviously go for a World Series. Will he have a chance to play? That's the biggest question.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is there's some flexibility here, right? Like he can play shortstop. It would be very good at second base. I don't know how much he's played outfield, but it feels like he can play outfield, right? Like that feels like
it's been discussed,
in a pinch. I just think the problem is it was fool's gold. Like I don't really buy that what he did in the major league level was really sustainable. This is a guy who, like, there is some pop here. The max exit velo in the majors was 109 miles an hour. That's pretty good. It's not great, but it's not a slap hitter. The problem is, like, pretty good pop, hits probably too many ground balls. I just don't know how much I buy it. He might be one where, like, Ronald Acuña has had problems hitting the ball on the ground too much as well. It's just when your max exit velo is 120 miles per hour, which I think he is one of the 4 players who has ever done that in the StatCast era, and your average is like 94 or whatever it was in his MVP season, you can get away with hitting a few too many ground balls. I don't know if Luisangel Acuña can really get away with it. And I think you saw that when he got to AAA. And really, outside of the half season with Texas at AA in 2023, it's been a lot of pretty meager production throughout Luisangel Acuña's career. So he's got a ton of speed. He makes a decent amount of contact. He's got decent pop, and it could all come together.
Right. That's what I was going to say.
It could come together as like an Andres Jimenez type, maybe a little more pop, but
what I was cramming a lot into the phrase, it doesn't take much to move the needle with prospects. And what I meant by that is oftentimes it suddenly all comes together.
Sure.
When you look at the numbers and it's like, is this guy really a prospect? And he was terrible. Luisangel Acuña was terrible at AAA last year. That's why I said I wanted to leave him out of my top 100 this year. But you start looking at the individual components, and you said he's very fast and he knows how to use that speed, runs a lot. He makes contact at a nice rate. The exit velocities are very solid and potentially could get better as young as he is. And he positioned himself, I think, to get a look with the Mets at some point next year with the impact he made down the stretch in 2024. So it is like I don't have a lot of confidence Luisangel Acuña is going to be an impact player in fantasy, maybe ever, but he's right on the verge of showing if he can be. And I like that in a prospect. I like finding out sooner if they're going to sink or swim rather than sinking 5 years into a guy and then just having to cut him loose because he never developed into anything.
All right, let's take a quick break. When we return, we'll move on to number 18 in the shortstop rankings. We'll do that right after this.
At CBS Sports Golazo Network, we're bringing you the game.
The madness of Messi arrives!
Breaking down the game.
This is unlike anything else in the world.
And changing the game.
Get it all for nil.
That means free.
Whoa.
And all day long!
24/7.
Welcome back in. Counting down Scott's top 20 shortstop prospects. Number 18 on the list is one of three Mariners prospects you're going to hear about today. That is Cole Young, 21 years old, a first-round pick back in 2022, and he had a solid showing at AA this year. He hit 271, 9 homers, 23 steals. It looks like there's a big hit tool here, Scott, and speed. Some questions on power. What do you see from Cole Young?
Yeah, there were always questions about power for Cole Young, and those questions as he moves up the ladder are being answered in a less and less favorable way. Like the comp I keep making every year for Cole Young becomes a guy with lower end power. And it's a shame all of these guys play in the Mariners organization, the three shortstop prospects, because eventually they're going to have to play at T-Mobile Park, and that's going to suppress power further, you would think. So right now, Cole Young, good hit tool, seems to make good use of his speed, but not going to be like an elite stolen base guy. So the range of outcomes, the potential outcomes would seem to range from like Steven Kwan at the very high end to Bryson Stott to Jake Cronenworth if he doesn't end up running much at all.
I was thinking like JP Crawford with the play discipline. That's more of a zero in speed.
Crawford never developed into the hitter he was in the Phillies organization at the time. He never developed into much of a hitter at all. So I would hope Cole Young is a better hitter than that. I know Crawford had that good second half in 2023, but apart from that, he was someone I wasn't excited to put on this list, Cole Young, but he was somebody who I felt like I couldn't leave off the list because he's going to be on everybody's list.
Fair enough. Let's move on to number 17, Jacob Wilson of the Oakland A's, son of former major leaguer Jack Wilson, of course. He's turning 23 in March, first-round pick in 2023. And this dude hit .433 in the minors this year. Only 53 games, small sample size, a 4% strikeout rate at AAA. Chris, the question here is, can Jacob Wilson do anything else besides hit for batting average?
I'm not really a believer. I know, like, look, you hit 400 at any level of professional baseball and you belong on a list and will get people excited and all that. And he has some legitimately superlative skills. I just think, like, you just have to look at Luis Arias, who, like, I guess you can't say that Luis Arias is the best case scenario for Jacob Wilson because maybe Jacob Wilson has more power, but frankly, I don't think there's a ton of reason to believe that there's even average power here. Like, Luis Arias is fine for fantasy, but like if Luis Arias hits 300 instead of 320, he's a pretty fringy fantasy option. And maybe Jacob Wilson will be better than that. You know, maybe like he was 44th percentile in sprint speed last year, but remember, he hurt his hamstring in his very first plate appearance. So maybe he was just never 100% healthy. But like he has 6 stolen bases as a professional. So I think there's not going to be a lot of speed there. The quality of contact metrics are really bad in a way that, like, I think his approach probably works against him as well, where like maybe he has like 45 raw power, but when you swing at everything and you make contact with bad pitches, that's going to make 45 grade power play like 35 grade power, which is probably the Luis Arias thing. And so I think a lot of things have to go right for Jacob Wilson to be much more than a very fringe fantasy option. And I just don't know if the upside is like something I want to bet on.
Well, yeah, I think And maybe this is why some prospect lists tend to prioritize 17-year-olds who you're just hoping hit big and probably won't, is because people are looking to maximize upside in fantasy. I hear a Luis Arise comp to Jacob Wilson, and I'm like, wow, it'd be great if a prospect became Luis Arise. Like, that sounds like a successful prospect. Yeah. And I think Jacob Wilson could obviously be less than Luis Arise. I agree that that's kind of the upside we're talking about here.
I think Luis Arise is like maybe not a 100% outcome, but like there aren't a lot of guys like that.
I look at Jacob Wilson, though.
Nico Horner without speed.
He's got a lot of runway. He's going to be the athletics. Like, to me, downside, I think of dynasty leagues as deep. And if a guy is on the verge of being a major league regular, which Jacob Wilson is going to be this year.
Yeah, he's the opening day shortstop.
Like, that counts for a lot for me. Is he going to ever be a top 10 shortstop in fantasy? I kind of doubt it. But is he going to be a top 20 shortstop in fantasy? A pretty good chance.
The Steamer projections for Jacob Wilson: 286, 8 home runs, 3 steals, and 126 games. And that's as a rookie. So I don't know. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if we get to the peak, can he be, 12 to 15 home runs maybe, and like 5 to 7 steals? It's just not exciting, but maybe he does all of that with a really, really good batting average. Your number 16 shortstop, Scott, you have Felnin Celestin of the Seattle Mariners, and he is extremely young, 19 years old, loaded with potential. If everything clicks, we could be looking at a 5-tool player, but he's just so far away. He's only played 32 games in rookie ball. For what it's worth, those numbers were amazing. Yeah. So big upside here, Scott, but a very long wait on Felnin Celestin.
Yep. So as I've been saying, there are a lot of teenage shortstop prospects with a lot of theoretical upside that I could choose to highlight here, but this seemed like the most representative of them, Felnin Celestin. And partly that's because he meets the high defensive threshold at shortstop. He's not a shortstop in name only. He's probably going to stay at shortstop. And part of it's because his approach at the plate is already so advanced in terms of which pitches to swing at, which ones to take, how high quality his contact is. To me, the dream scenario for Felnin Celestin is Hanley Ramirez. That's a comp that gets made a lot for teenage shortstop prospects, so don't take it as gospel. But I think that's the kind of upside we're talking about if everything breaks right.
You say the name Hanley Ramirez, and my personal reaction is, you had my curiosity. Now you have my attention. One of my all-time favorite baseball players.
Yeah. Electric back in the day. Number 15 on your list, you have Colson Montgomery of the White Sox, and how the mighty have fallen. Montgomery was rated as a top 15 overall prospect entering last season. He struggled mightily at AAA. He hit .214 with a near 29% strikeout rate, bad quality of contact. Perhaps this creates a buying opportunity in dynasty leagues, or, a last round pick in a redraft league, something like that. I had the Welsh on a month ago. He saw Colson Montgomery out in the Arizona Fall League. Kind of speculated that maybe he was playing through an injury this past season. And
yeah,
for what it's worth, Montgomery looked great in the Arizona Fall League. Plate discipline was much better. He had more walks and strikeouts while he was out there. So,
yeah, I did see Baseball America's write-up. They made reference to some sort of injury he was playing through, but I couldn't find much confirmation of that. But it would make sense because it was such a steep drop off in production at AAA for Colson Montgomery, and the strikeout rate was just absurdly high. It hasn't seemed to hurt his prospect stock that much with the conventional rank list. They're all giving him a lot of the benefit of the doubt. He did. And you mentioned the Arizona Fall League. He improved, and he showed improvement late in the season as well at AAA, 275 with 8 home runs in his final 37 games. But while last year he was like a top 5 shortstop prospect, now I have him here at top 15 because obviously there's more reason for concern. But I don't think the upside has changed, but certainly the bust potential has.
There's a really good piece on Fangraphs from October of this year with Colson Montgomery talking to David Lawlar. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Where he talks about like the mechanics of his swing, and he tried to pull the ball in the air early in the season, and he says it just completely screwed up his swing. He wasn't keeping the bat head in the zone long enough, was swinging and missing at pitches that he should have hit. So that's his explanation for why he had a bad season in 2024. I will say, we talked last week about Ideal Amador and the Colorado Rockies and just not giving the Rockies the benefit of the doubt. I'm kind of there with the White Sox where,
Sure.
The last couple of big name prospects for them really not last couple outside of Luis Robert, their biggest prospects over the past half decade have pretty much all flopped. So yeah, that's my concern there. Obviously it's a different version of the organization, although based on last year, maybe not a better version of the organization.
Yeah, I don't think it was Baseball America that said Colson Montgomery had an injury. I'm reading their write-up again and not seeing it there. So, but what Chris said makes a lot of sense too.
Some early reports that Colson Montgomery will compete for a spot this spring, whether it's at shortstop or third base, where he played third base while he was in the Arizona Fall League. So that could be an option for the White Sox this spring. Number 14, we have Alex Freeland of the Dodgers. He's 23 years old, a third-round pick back in 2022. Switch hitter with some pop and some speed. He had 18 home runs, 31 steals, and hits the ball really hard, 91.7 average exit velocity at AAA. But questions about the batting average, Scott. Had over 130 strikeouts 2 seasons in a row in the minors. And, of course, he plays for the Dodgers. So your best bet is probably him getting traded to another team.
Well, maybe. He seems like a legit shortstop, and that's a position they've struggled to fill ever since Trey Turner followed Corey Seager out the door. Mookie Betts is in line to play there now, and if that doesn't work out, they could shift Tommy Edman to shortstop, but they might just want to leave Tommy Edman in center. Freeland now has performed well at AAA. He's 23 years old. He's close. He's close if the Dodgers need him. And he was one of the biggest risers this past year. Wasn't really well known among dynasty players prior to last year. But there's a lot to like here. There's power, there's speed. He walked 91 times between 3 levels last year. And just a really solid all-around prospect is Alex Freeland.
It's just he might hit 225 in the majors. Like he might be a pretty good player overall. Because he'll walk a ton, but yeah, that's the concern looking at it is it looks like both a relatively high strikeout rate player and a low BABIP player, which, look.
Yeah, I don't know. The strikeout rates don't concern me that much. A 25% strikeout rate, it was probably even less than that.
It was 21% at AA, 27% at AAA.
Yeah, that's not bad at all.
It's not bad, but then that's at AA. Like if it's 27% at the major league level, and he's a guy who hits a lot of infield fly balls and has just generally run pretty low BABIPs at the high minors, it's just
I don't know. Good zone contact rate, very low chase rate, 19% at AAA. I don't know. I think you guys are selling the hit tool a little short here.
Did want to point out the 27% strikeout rate at AAA. That came despite a 7.9% swinging strike rate. So those things don't line up. I wonder if, with like the ABS system,
there could be some passivity there.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Walks.
Taking too many hittable pitches.
Yeah, it's a possibility.
But okay, so across the 3 levels, where's the plate appearance number for Alex Freeland? Because of course you'd expect a guy's first stint at AAA, he's going to strike out a little more. But you normally don't see a guy go from being a 20% strikeout guy at one level to an almost 30% strikeout rate at another level. Like normally their strikeout rate, once they have time to adjust, holds pretty steady. And yeah, his overall strikeout rate last year was 21.6% between the three levels. I don't see this as a big concern for Freeland.
All right, next up, I'm going to put 13 and 12 together here, Scott, because they were both drafted out of high school in this year's draft. So number 13 is Bryce Rayner of the Detroit Tigers, and number 12 is Konnor Griffin with the Pittsburgh Pirates. So just wanted to point out the Tigers system is so loaded. I'm behind the eight ball here, but man, I was looking through their prospects. They have a lot of very interesting names. Bryce Rayner, 19 years old. As I mentioned, first round pick in this year's draft, already a big body, 6'3". So, very projectable. He could be a 5-tool player. He's got hit, he's got power, he's got some run. And then Konnor Griffin, also 18 years old, another big dude, 6'4". Questions about the hit tool, but could be a 30-30 bat. I mean, he had 87 steals in high school this season. He led the nation. So big upside for both of these guys. Scott, what do you have on Bryce Rayner and Konnor Griffin?
Not much, because they didn't play as professionals last year. They got drafted out of high school. And so you're just totally going on scouting reports here. And maybe you can find video clips of highlights and say, oh, that guy kind of looks like Hunter Pence or whatever. And they tend, when they're the year after they're drafted, they tend to be viewed with rose-colored glasses, given every benefit of the doubt. And then a lot of times they get to playing in minor league games and their stock can plummet. So we're pre-plummet right now for Bryce Rayner and Konnor Griffin. We're seeing them through the rose-colored glasses, and they're all tooled out. I've seen Corey Seager comp for Bryce Rayner. I think that probably gives the hit tool a bit too much credit. He's going to have some issues with strikeouts that I think will prevent him from being Corey Seager, but there's offensive potential. Konnor Griffin, I think, is a little more raw, but is also a little more tooled out, can steal a lot of bases. I think I don't know. They both rate well for power, but Griffin might have even higher ceiling as far as that goes. I do think in the long run, and some prospect publications even list him as this. I think in the long run, Konnor Griffin's going to be an outfielder rather than a shortstop. But since he hasn't played as a professional yet, we can't say for sure where the Pirates are going to play him.
All right, number 11, you have Aidan Miller with the Phillies, who is 20 years old, a first-round pick just last year in 2023, 27th overall, and projects to hit for big power. I mean, the upside here, raw power grade, according to Fangraphs, 70, and for MLB.com, it's a 60. So, Chris, if we ever see Aidan Miller make it to the Phillies, it's a great ballpark to hit in, and he's got lots of power. So,
yeah, I mean, I think the key thing there is it's the Phillies, and it's the Dave Dombrowski Phillies. So there's probably an even chance that he ever plays for the Phillies. But yeah, looks like a lot to like. Good power, plate discipline. Looks like what you want from a guy at that age and stage in his career. It's just until you get to the high level of the minors, it's a less extreme version of what Scott was talking about, but like that jump, like, okay, you were good at Class A and high A. 5 games at Double A, I still think that means you've got a lot to prove. And I think that's where Aidan Miller is, especially when you're talking about a guy who scouts at least think has some hit tool questions.
Mm-hmm. Scott, anything to add on Aidan Miller?
He still seems to earn high marks for power. It hasn't really manifested yet with the 11 home runs and almost 400 at bats, but that still seems like it's going to be his carrying tool if he has one. So hopefully we see more evidence of that this year. Mostly, I think it's encouraging that he's made it to Double A as a 20-year-old.
All right, let's take our final break. When we return into the top 10 shortstop prospects, we'll do that right after this.
If you love football, this is the best time of the year.
This is as big as it gets.
the stuff of absolute dreams.
Welcome back in. Before we move into the top 10 shortstop prospects, we'll recap 20 through 11. And Scott had Angel Genao of the Guardians at number 20, followed by Luisangel Acuña with the Mets, Cole Young with the Mariners, Jacob Wilson with the A's, Felnin Celestin with the Mariners, Colson Montgomery with the White Sox, Alex Freeland with the Dodgers, Bryce Rayner with the Tigers, Konnor Griffin with the Pirates, and Aidan Miller with the Phillies. Into the top 10, another Detroit Tiger, Kevin McGonigle, 20 years old, 37th overall pick in 2023. And we are looking at a big hit tool here. Hit 309 in the minors, added 22 steals and 853 OPS. Scott, I know this has to be a prospect right up your alley because he has awesome plate discipline.
Yeah, I do like that. It's obviously a bigger deal in points leagues than Roto, but I do think it makes for a more projectable path overall. I used to have a philosophy with prospects that if you could hit, if you had a good hit tool, you had good plate discipline, you could develop the power later. I think that was mostly true during the juice ball era, which has covered like half of my career.
And there were some notable, like Francisco Lindor feels like the like archetype of that, where he really didn't hit for power at all in the minors, but great contact skills, and it turned into power.
Yeah, that is a big one, and there were a lot of examples of that. So McGonigle, I wasn't, by ranking him 10th here, I wasn't giving him that kind of benefit of the doubt. I feel like I keep using that expression. I was trying to think of a different one. But you look at some of the scouting reports for McGonigle, and they make it sound like power is in the offing for him. And so maybe I have him ranked too low here because the hit tool is great, the plate discipline. He walked 46 times compared to 28 strikeouts between the two levels of A-ball. So that's great. He steals bases. Really, the only thing that's missing is power. The comp I made in the article was like a Brandon Nimmo or maybe an early career Matt Carpenter before he started selling out for home runs. He was more batting average and doubles focused, got on base a lot. That's what I was envisioning Kevin McGonigle becoming. But I just want everybody to know that the belief is out there that he'll develop actual power too, in which case he might be more like a top 5 shortstop prospect than top 10.
Max exit velo last year was 112 miles per hour.
That's
good. Hit a 434-foot home run at one point, which is, I mean, he only had 4 or 5 of them. So, 20% of them were 430-foot homers. That is a big thing for me as I've developed as a baseball fan and analyst, is there are so many, I mean, not so many, but there are a lot of guys in the minors who put up bonkers plate discipline and get the bat on the ball. And like, look, these are professional baseball players, but defense in the minors is not very good, especially compared to the majors. And so you can run up super high batting average on balls in play, and you can run low strikeout rates because there aren't a lot of pitchers who can consistently challenge you for strikes with good stuff. It's just, if you can't hit for power, it's really hard to run that kind of play discipline and become an effective, like truly effective hitter at the majors. There are places for guys like that at the major league level to a certain extent. Like Nick Madrigal is on the low end of that, but we've seen like Nico Horner and Bryson Stott and Andres Jimenez, these guys who have like 15-ish% strikeout rates, below average power, but are enough of a threat that you can't just pound them with fastballs and get them out that way. And so if McGonigle can be even an average power hitter, it makes everything else look so much better. And so that's the key thing to watch. If he can be a 10 to 15 homer guy, even that is a big deal for this kind of profile.
Well, I mean, Baseball America, their power grade for Kevin McGonigle is 55, which would be more like a 25 to 30 homer guy.
Mm-hmm. Fangraphs has the upside for raw power at 45, and then MLB.com has it at 50. So if we can get 15 to 20 home runs out of him with a really good batting average and he has some sneaky speed,
and
Kevin McGonigle, really interesting prospect.
We're talking about the 20 to 80 scouting scale where 50 is average. So a 45 to 50, that's a reasonable range.
That's
right?
like 50 to 20 homer power.
I think 45 to 55 is like, there are reasonable disagreements. It might come down to swing shape, but that seems like there's not that much disagreement, and that'll play if it's a 65 grade hit tool or whatever.
Let's move on to number 9, Carson Williams of the Tampa Bay Rays, and he is 21 years old, first round pick back in 2021. The dude is absolutely tooled up. Big power, big speed, awesome glove, 20 homers, 33 steals at AA this season. The big question, Scott. Yeah. Notice I haven't mentioned the batting average. I haven't mentioned the strikeouts. Will he make enough contact? That is the $1 million question.
I begrudgingly rank Carson Williams as high as 9th here. I really don't like him for fantasy.
I thought he could be higher, honestly.
Oh, yeah, he's going to be higher.
Yeah. In real life prospect rankings, for sure.
Yeah, well, because he's a great defender. And so that only matters in fantasy to the extent that it affects a player's playing time. Carson Williams is going to play a lot just because of that glove. And he can hit the ball hard and he can run well. But yeah, the strikeouts are a problem. This is a guy who is, even at the lower level, striking out upwards of 30% of the time. This year, entirely spent at AA, he got it down to 28.5%. Still not good, but it's at least trending the right way. So I'm at least hopeful for like a Willy Adames type outcome here offensively. Maybe with more stolen bases. Let's say Willy Adames the year he just had, where he got to 20 stolen bases. Maybe that's what Carson Williams can be. But if he falls short of that, it could be pretty ugly what he provides to you in fantasy. So already I'm thinking I probably want to move Kevin McGonigle ahead of him because I feel better about McGonigle than Williams at this point.
You want an irresponsible comp that I just thought of?
What do you have?
What? Off-peak Eugenio Suarez, but with speed.
Okay.
The one that I came
like
up
not 49 homer Eugenio Suarez, but like 30, 31 homer, bad batting average, but like that dude stealing 20 bases also. It's a pretty awesome player.
I was thinking Trevor Story if his entire career was not in Coors Field.
Well, hopefully, the bigger problem for Trevor Story outside of Coors Field has been that he's, what are those little guys called that like you hit a button and they collapse? There's like a string.
I know.
I don't know what they're called, but that's kind of what Trevor Story has become since leaving Colorado, unfortunately.
Yeah, kind of has. And some behind the scenes scouting. The Welsh and I got the opportunity to interview Carson Williams at the Arizona Fall League a couple of years ago. I can confirm, huge fan of Fortnite. He was trying to rush us through the interview because he said, I got to get home and play Fortnite. So that's all I can tell you.
Sounds like a man whose head is in the game.
There you go. Number 8, Scott, you have Jett Williams of the New York Mets. And I think a bit of a polarizing prospect here. 21 years old, first round pick in 2022. Small dude. Just 5'6", but he's got sneaky power, tons of speed. Weird season for him. Missed a lot of time due to a wrist injury. Played out in the AFL. Also left the AFL with an injury. But Scott, pitching in the Arizona Fall League is bad. Jett Williams had 30 strikeouts in 22 games there. So yeah, I don't really know what to make of him at this point.
Well, I give him a break because he basically missed the whole season
with a wrist injury,
with wrist surgery. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So while I don't love Carson Williams as a fantasy prospect, I love Jett Williams as a fantasy prospect. So I artificially, or maybe not artificially, but I applying my own sensibilities, I lowered Williams relative to the consensus. Carson Williams, they're both Williams, right? I lowered Carson Williams relative to the consensus, and I raised Jett Williams because I see a lot of Corbin Carroll-like traits here for Jett Williams. Looking at what he did in 2023, he's an on-base freak. He's going to steal a ton of bases. Just a prototypical modern day leadoff hitter with the good on base skills, gives you the speed you're looking for, and isn't a zero in terms of power. He's shorter than Corbin Carroll, 5'6" instead of, I think Carroll's 5'9",
5'10".
But it's that same sort of, the power catches you off guard just looking at him. He can even send balls out the other way. So I think there's a lot of reason for excitement for Jett Williams because Francisco Lindor is locked up long term. There's a good chance Jett Williams winds up in center field rather than shortstop, or maybe he's traded. That's always possible. But either way, I think he's going to be a better version of Pete Crow Armstrong, let's say.
I have a more, what now seems like a more pessimistic comp. It feels very Anthony Volpe to me. Like, doesn't actually have good power, but can generate enough power to play. But by doing so, he has to sacrifice batting average in a really extreme way. And that's what Jett Williams looks like. Now, the thing is, we have, 600 plate appearances across 3 seasons now with Carson Williams to go on. So,
do we have much exit velocity data? Because I can't. I don't get exit velocity readings on these guys until they get to AAA, and he played 6 games at AAA. So
yeah, I'm not seeing anything in the baseball prospectus. They usually reference some of the stuff. So yeah, I don't know on the raw power side. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope Jett Williams is closer to Scott's analysis because I have him in the Scott White Dynasty League, and I'm rooting for Jett Williams, so I hope it works out. Number 7, Scott, you have Jesus Made of the Milwaukee Brewers, and that's spelled like made, Jesus made, M-A-D-E.
I mean, just Jesus made is an awesome nickname. So we could also stick with that. Yeah.
This is a name who is climbing rapidly. He is only 17 years old, out of the Dominican Republic. He's only played in the Dominican Summer League, but he really impressed there. A triple slash of 331, 458, 554, showed off some power, lots of speed, great plate discipline. But Scott, I mean, it's a dangerous game. The guy is 17 years old, but I have seen some people say that he could be like a future number 1 overall prospect in baseball.
Yeah, that's the thing. I said earlier, Felnin Celestin was kind of the representative teenager with tons of upside who prospect hounds gravitate toward. I was kind of putting Jesus Made in a different class than that because the upside is just so overwhelming, and it seems like for being a 17-year-old, he has fewer questions to answer. I feel like 17-year-olds are obviously risky. They got a lot of development ahead of them. Their careers could go in any number of directions, but this feels sort of like Jason Dominguez felt like a can't miss 16, 17-year-old. That's kind of what Jesus Made feels like too. They're already comparing him to like Jackson Chourio, who also got a lot of hype as a teenager, and just like the Brewers did it again with Jesus Made, and that's why he ranks this high for me. I think he's really special.
Number 6, you have Sebastian Walcott of the Texas Rangers. He's 18 years old, out of the Bahamas. Big kid, 6'4", projectable body that will fill out, huge bat speed. Leads people to think there's a lot of power upside in the bat for Sebastian Walcott. Chris, the question here, once again, is will he hit enough? He had 132 strikeouts in 121 games this season. If he can get the bat on the ball, it looks like there's some huge power with Sebastian Walcott.
And he's incredibly young for the levels that he's gotten to. I mean, he made it to AA as an 18-year-old. We were praising who was it? Kevin McGonigle for getting to AA at 20, I think, or Aidan Miller, one of them, for getting to AA at 20. It's like, well, Sebastian Walcott did it at 18. Now, there is a little bit. I don't know if I've broached this on the actual podcast or just in our little pre and post show discussions, but the Padres and Rangers both kind of seem to be running like a Ponzi scheme with their prospects. This is my theory, where they just aggressively promote everyone like a level ahead of where anyone else would. So that, because every team's got their model of like, this guy's numbers at this age, at this level, make him and like maybe that's kind of my theory, that they're just juicing everyone's trade value. But beyond that, Sebastian Walcott held his own as an 18-year-old at high A. Like a 123 weighted runs created plus as an 18-year-old is really impressive. And there's a lot of strikeout issues, as you would expect. There's for a guy who has reached double A, there's a lot of different ways this can go because he is 18. Like that works both ways. You know, Baseball Prospectus, they're kind of high end and low end comps were like Fernando Tatis Jr. on the high end and Joe Adell at the low end. Oof. And like physically, there's not that much different between Fernando Tatis and Joe Adell. It's just the ineffable stuff.
The finer points of holding up to advanced pitchers, recognizing breaking balls. That's what Walcott has to prove.
And that's the stuff he just hasn't. You can't really be tested on that stuff when you're in high A. Like that's the thing, is that the pitchers are just as raw as the hitters. So this is one that if he's going to start at double A this year as a 19-year-old, and if he starts out really well, then we're going to start to have some really, really interesting discussions about Walcott. And like, this might be one where he falls to the bottom of the top 100 and maybe even out if he struggles, or could be a top 10 worldwide prospect by, June.
Mm-hmm. The number 5 shortstop prospect is Leo Vries of the Padres. Excuse me.
Kind of just repeat everything we said about Sebastian Walcott.
Yeah. You might see him in some outlets. The first name is Leo Dallas. So Leodalis. 18 years old, signed out of the Dominican Republic last offseason. Another one, just big, projectable power. He can run. He's showed, I think, more plate discipline than someone like Sebastian Walcott. Scott, look, Chris, you mentioned that, the Padres are being really aggressive with these guys. They sent Vries out to the Arizona Fall League. Like, he just came over to the States this year. So,
I mean, he was 17 and he played 75 games at low A. It's not quite the Ethan Salas plan, because I think Ethan Salas was he at double A at 17? But either way, it's very aggressive. And again, held his own.
Yeah, no, I mean that you have to put the numbers for Leo Vries into perspective, because the overall stat line probably won't blow you away. But he was the top international signing going into 2024, going into last year. And usually it takes those guys forever to get to full season ball, and they put him right at low A. And it went horribly at first, but over his final 34 games there, he slashed 285, 407, 599. 10 homers and 7 steals in those 34 games. So he figured it out, and that has me very enthusiastic about Leo Vries' future. I'm not alone in that regard.
Yes, I did want to mention, while the batting average looks lower overall, 237, 361 on base. It's just a really good eye at the plate for someone that young. Again, 18 years old for Leo Vries. Number 4 shortstop prospect, you have Colt Emerson of the Seattle Mariners. He's 19 years old, a first-round pick just last year, and he's got a strong feel at the plate. He gets on base. He hasn't shown much power yet, but people seem to think it'll come for Colt Emerson. Was limited with some injuries this past season, but Scott, I mean, this is another one where I've seen people really, really excited about him. We just haven't really seen huge numbers yet in the minors.
Yeah, it's one I was a little unsure where to rank Colt Emerson, because I look at the numbers and I'm like, really? But everybody seems to say this guy is a stud. And, you dig deeper into the numbers, it seems like he excels in the areas that are hardest to teach, like pitch selection and contact quality. It's hard to teach that. But where he's trailing is in things you can't teach, like pulling the ball in the air. And if he starts doing that more, we'll start to see those power numbers that people are projecting onto Colt Emerson. And I think the ultimate upside is this is another comp that gets used a lot, but Corey Seager, except maybe he'll even run a little bit. So there's, I think at 19, it's hard to say exactly what Colt Emerson's going to become, but you can see how the foundation is there for him to be a superstar type shortstop.
And worth noting, not much younger than Sebastian Walcott. He was 18 for pretty much the entire season, right? July. He turned 19 in July. But also missed time this year with an oblique injury early on and then a foot injury. So you have to add that on, that like aggressive promotions and dealt with injuries and still, was fairly productive. So that, more impressive than the overall line would make you think, which I think is true of each of the last three guys we've talked about.
Again, that's Colt Emerson of the Mariners. Number 3 shortstop prospect, J.J. Wetherholt of the Cardinals, 22 years old. He was a first-round pick in this year's draft, 7th overall, 5-tool potential, big hit tool. First taste in the minors went pretty well at A-ball. And this is someone, as a college bat, Scott, that could move pretty quickly with the Cardinals.
Yeah, it just seems like a really safe projection here. He was a celebrated hitter in college. He does well against all pitch types, really patient approach. He's kind of opposite field minded with this swing. So it's not clear if he's going to actualize the full extent of his power, but physically there's a lot of potential for power there with JJ Wetherholt, speed as well. Potential 5 category outcome here, and good performer in points leagues as well because of that disciplined approach. Only 105 minor league at bats to his name so far, so maybe this will look different a year from now. But right now, I think there's plenty of reason to be optimistic about JJ Wetherholt. Not sure he's going to wind up at shortstop long term, but even as a second baseman, for fantasy, it'd be even better if he wound up at second base, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know if you've done first-year player draft rankings yet, Scott, but do you have an idea where Wetherholt might rank?
Okay.
Top 5, right?
I've seen top 3.
Right. So are we putting Roki Sasaki in there? Because he would probably be number 1.
You'd have to.
I think Roki Sasaki and Bazana, Charlie Condon would have been in that conversation, but he struggled.
Yeah, right. I mean, it might be Wetherholt ahead of Condon at this point, though. Obviously a teeny tiny sample wouldn't surprise me I wouldn't be upset if you preferred Condon to Wetherholt, but
there's the Rockies of it all as well.
Right.
Although there's the Cardinals of it all as well, because it's been a pretty rough stretch for them developing hitters too.
And then, like we talked about on the last podcast, I like Nick Kurtz a lot as well. But I think I'd go Wetherholt over Kurtz.
All right, into the top 2. Your number 2 shortstop prospect, Marcelo Mayer of the Red Sox, one of their big 4 prospects. We have Mayer and Roman Anthony and Christian Campbell and Kyle Teal. We talked about some of those names already on the previous podcast, but Mayer is 21 years old. He was a first-round pick, 4th overall back in 2021. He's kind of had an up and down minor league career, but he hit well this year at AA, 307 batting average, 850 OPS. Power is supposed to be his best tool, but we haven't really seen much of it yet. Chris, talk to me about Marcelo Mayer and whether or not we could see him here in 2025.
I think there's a very good chance we see him in 2025. I mean, once you've conquered AA, I've always been of the opinion that once you're at AA, you can always be a good month away from getting called up if things break right. Not in every organization, and the fact that he hasn't played at AAA and some of the other guys, Roman Anthony and Christian Campbell specifically have, probably makes it more likely that those guys will get to AAA first. But they all got called up together to AAA. It's just Mayer was not healthy when he got called up. Am I remembering that correctly?
Mayer didn't play this past year at AAA.
Yeah, but I thought he was part. I thought he got called up there and just wasn't able to play. Maybe I'm incorrect, but like you said, Frank, the the power is supposed to be one of the strengths, and that hasn't really been there in the minors, especially at AA. ISO's below 200. Both times he's been at AA. It's 120 games. He was very overwhelmed in 2023 at the end of the season, so don't know how much to hold that against him, but we just haven't seen that power yet. And so, I do question what the ultimate fantasy upside is based on what we've seen in the high minors especially. But, this is one where the scouting reports have kind of been more optimistic than the actual numbers for a while. And I'm never quite sure how to square that circle.
Right.
And, if power is your strength, being a left-handed hitter at Fenway is a tough place to apply your wares, and it does make me think that some of the batting average struggles we've seen in the minors could be an issue with the swing that he has.
I think the batting average struggles were mostly injury related, particularly in 2023. Yeah. He was playing with a shoulder impingement this past year, a lumbar strain. Those are fairly significant injuries. And so you can understand that pulling down Marcelo Mayer's numbers. He hit 307 this year, even with that lumbar strain going on. So I do think the hit tool is very good and the most predictable part of the path Marcelo Mayer is going to take. I think he profiles something like Bo Bichette or Xander Bogaerts, which is more like a mid-tier shortstop in fantasy than an elite guy. So why do I rank Marcelo Mayer as high as 2? Well, it's not something I'm totally committed to. I feel like shortstop, it's very deep in prospects, clearly, but it's kind of a microcosm of the prospect pool in general right now, where there aren't those clear, obvious runaway number one contenders. I think if you made JJ Wetherholt the top shortstop prospect, or Colt Emerson, or Leo DeVries, or even Jesus Made, I think there's an argument to be made. Those players I just named, I think, have more upside than Marcelo Mayer. But Mayer and the number one guy, I'll go ahead and reveal. Can I go ahead and reveal?
No. Okay, now you can.
Jordan Lawlar is the number one guy.
Oh,
Marcelo Mayer and Jordan Lawlar, I don't think have as much upside as Jesus Made or Leo DeVries or all those guys I just mentioned, but they're right on the precipice of being major leaguers. So their likelihood of being abject failures is very low. And while I don't think they're going to be first round types in fantasy, I think there's a good chance they're fifth round types in fantasy. So that's why I have them at the top of the list still.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit more about Jordan Lawlar, who is your number one shortstop prospect, 22 years old, first round pick back in 2021. And he was snake bitten by injury this year. Pun intended. He's got big power and speed. Some questions about the hit tool. I think he'll need some seasoning to start the year, Chris, but I don't know that the D-backs are married to Geraldo Perdomo as their starting shortstop. So when Lawlar's ready, he could get the call.
Yeah, I mean, look, Perdomo is fine. He's kind of like the most fine player in baseball. He just is so unexciting, but he's not like a huge hole in your lineup, and they've been content, I think, over the last year and a half to just let him hold it down until Lawlar is ready. It's a little frustrating, and I feel like there might be a little bit of fatigue with Lawlar because we talked about him a lot in the first half of 2023. He got to AA as a 20-year-old. They called him up as a 20-year-old, and did he get hurt at the majors or did he get sent down? He's dealt with a bunch of injuries over the past couple of years. He's been a professional since 2021 and has only played about 210 games total. So it's been not just this year. He had a hand injury in 2023. There was something right after he got called up.
Yeah, he had a hand injury in September of 2020.
Yeah. And then it was like hamstring and another hand injury last year, whatever it was. So
yeah, thumb surgery this past year cost him most of the year.
Barely played over the past year and a half. And so part of the problem is like that's a really important year and a half in the development cycle of a young hitter. I mean, we're talking about a guy who was just 20 at this peak, or maybe had just turned 21 when he got called up. Has barely played at AAA. And so we kind of don't know what Jordan Lawlar looks like right now. He played 12 games at AAA this year and was really good, but who knows? So for a guy who has a good shot to be, if not up on opening day, certainly in the first half of the first half, some might call that the first quarter. It feels like there's a lot of uncertainty here, but it's also potentially an impact fantasy bat in like a Jazz Chisholm-y way.
Well, the comp I'm making is Marcus Semien.
Sure. Okay.
I think Jordan Lawlar he excels at getting on base. Will work the count and everything like that. He's going to run a lot, steal a lot of bases. He doesn't have a lot of natural power, but he's good at elevating to his pull side and maximizing his power that way, which sounds a lot like Marcus Semien. Of course, it also sounds a lot like Anthony Volpe. So I'm a little concerned Lawlar ends up going the Volpe route, but they're called prospects for a reason. There's no one that's totally foolproof. And if that's the downside case for Lawlar, look, Anthony Volpe's still getting drafted.
Yeah.
It's not like he's useless in fantasy. And then, of course, the upside case of Marcus Semien is pretty darn exciting.
All right, well, there you have it. Top 20 shortstop prospects. Next week, we'll move into the outfield and then pitchers after that. But we are going to wrap there. For Scott and Chris, I am Frank. Thanks, as always, for tuning into Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And we will be back again on Thursday. Bye-bye.